Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Kiran Malhotra. I'm the Executive Director for TiE Silicon Valley, and we have a fantastic panel for you this evening. In fact, actually, this is our last panel before our flagship conference, TiECon, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. But what I'd like to do, usually at the beginning of our events, is I'd like to give folks a little bit of an overview about TiE, who we are, why we are. I know many of you are in the audience that may have heard me say this 100 times and could probably do this in your sleep, but there are always a couple of you who are new to TiE, may not know about us, so I'd like to do that. So I'd like to see how many members we have in the audience today. Fantastic. How many soon-to-be members by the end of this session? Come on, don't be shy. So we were founded here in 1992 in the Valley by a group of folks from the Indus region, and they came with nothing but their education, and they came with their desire to work hard, and they worked hard and they became very successful, and they did this without a lot of support, and they said, you know what, wouldn't it be nice if we came together and formed a group where we could give back to entrepreneurs and we could help other entrepreneurs succeed. And so that's what they did. So in 1992, they started with these small, sort of informal dinner meetings. They would bring successful entrepreneurs of the time. Those entrepreneurs would tell their story. And over 20 years, our network has grown into 57 chapters, 14 countries, with the sole mission from day one of fostering entrepreneurship. And so in this ecosystem, we have three major stakeholders. We have our member community, which many of you are members. And membership, by the way, is such the deal. It's $100 a year, which is 30 cents a day. You cannot find this deal anywhere. So it's a great, and you get many benefits of membership. Then we have our charter member community. This is an invitation-only membership, and these folks are very highly successful entrepreneurs. They're successful corporate executives, C-level corporate executives, and technology professionals, or in academia, and they're invited because we ask of them probably the most important thing you can ask of somebody, and that's their time and their expertise. And they give that very freely to the TiE ecosystem. So they provide the chairship for these programs, they are our board of directors, they provide our mentoring, and they provide a whole host of other, really volunteer activities that they do. We have a whole bunch of charter members in the room. Can I see a show of hands of CMs? Raise them really high. So these are wonderful people to know. They are very successful in the Valley. They'll be wonderful as mentors. I suggest you find somebody, if you're not sitting next to them, go find someone, sit next to them, get to know them, because I guarantee you'll find somebody that will be your friend, mentor, business partner, whatever. There is only one board member in the room tonight, and that's actually our program chair, and he is Naveen Bisht, who is right over here. But thank you to all the charter members. Really, they're the backbone of the organization. Then we have our third category of stakeholders, and that's our sponsor community. So the charter members are the backbone, and the sponsors are the lifeblood. So they provide a lot of the funding that we have, that we can provide these programs that we do, the quality of programs that we do. Because we're a nonprofit organization, we rely heavily on the sponsors. And so we've got sponsors from the VC community, from the big corporations, from the banks, law firms, service providers, and we thank the sponsors for their generous support. Actually, I think the only sponsor in the room tonight is IBM. I saw Piyush somewhere earlier, but thank you to IBM, and thank you to all the sponsors for the generous support of TiE. Then we have actually a fourth category of stakeholders, and that is from all three, and that's our volunteers. So everybody that you see, from Dan, who is our faithful, person who takes pictures and takes video of our events, to the people who help us at the door, and even to our panelists, to our chairs, all of those folks are volunteers of TiE. We have about 400 such volunteers. I have about 4 staff and 400 volunteers. And so that's the really amazing thing about TiE, is that that's how it works. We continually get these people who are willing to give back to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We do about 60 plus programs a year, just like this one, throughout the year, so that's more than one a week. We do them along all the 5 hot technology verticals, and since we're technology focused in the Valley, that's what we focus on. So we have social, mobile, cloud, energy, life sciences. We have a TiE Women's Forum, we have an economic forum, and we have a growth company forum that focuses on mid to late stage companies. We have purely networking mixers that we do. We have the Startup Leadership Program, which is kind of a 9-month program for budding entrepreneurs. We launched 2 programs last year. One's My Story, and that's kind of going back to our roots, featuring a successful entrepreneur who tells their story and their journey. And the next one is coming up in June. That is the first Tuesday of each month. And then, of course, we have Pitch Fest. Pitch Fest is something we launched purely to give entrepreneurs a chance to pitch and practice their pitch in front of a panel of VCs. So the next Pitch Fest will also be in June, post-TiECon. And then we've got TiE Angels, which we launched in August of 2010. So we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary of TiE Angels. We funded 14 companies to date to about $5.5 million, and that number is higher to about 20 million, even more, with some select VC sponsors. That's been a very, very successful program for us. So if you're interested, if you're a company, a promising startup company, or you know somebody who's looking for seed funding, I would highly encourage you to refer them to TiE Angels. You can go to our website, click on TiE Angels. It's an online application. It's a rolling application, and we see companies once a month. We just had our dinner meeting last night. Or you can talk to me, you can talk to Naveen, he's part of the steering committee as well. And then, of course, we have TiECon, which is our big flagship conference. How many of you have been to TiECon? How many came to TiECon 2011? So TiECon is our flagship conference. It is the showcasing of all of TiE and the best of TiE. We have fantastic keynotes. We've confirmed Dr. Deepak Chopra for this year. We've got a huge innovation expo where we feature, last year featured over 120 promising startup companies all the way to large corporations. We are featuring the TiE 50, which is the 50 hottest companies across the land, across 5 technology verticals. And then we've got a whole host of panels along these technology verticals. We've got an entrepreneurship track. We've got the youth track this year, where we're featuring Vinod Khosla on one panel, and then Tim Draper is moderating another panel. And so that's something new that we're doing this year. So TiECon 2012, for our 20th anniversary, promises to be a huge, huge conference. So I highly encourage you to attend or register if you have not. Now, just for tonight, if you see, I don't know if these little cards are on your table, but you can get a promo code if you register for tonight. That's good for 24 hours for $70 off the price of TiECon. And lastly, I would like to thank the panelists for this evening. Thank you for your time. Thanks to my staff and thanks to my board of directors. I'm going to turn it over to Naveen, our program chair, and thank you for your attention.
Are you guys having fun? I don't think anyone had drinks. Anyway, I'm not going to take much time. Let's give a big round of applause to Kiran and her staff of 4 people that you heard. They do a really outstanding job in bringing out all these programs and supporting us in getting all of you here. What I would like to do is introduce our 2 co-chairs. Like she mentioned, all of us are volunteers here, and really and they're very busy, and at the same time they make time available for us to put together these great panel we have here, which you'll be hearing from. So one of the co-chairs is Bhaskar Roy, another is Shalini Govilpai. So Bhaskar is himself a very successful entrepreneur, and he's done a number of startups, and the last one was a company called Quick, which if you have used video sharing on the mobile apps, they were the pioneers in it, and the company was bought by Skype, and so he was part of Skype, and now he's part of Microsoft. So he's head of product for Quick, as well as he's co-chair for our social media program here. And then we have Shalini over there, sitting right there. And Shalini is a director for Google YouTube products. So, and again, like she's very busy, and I had to just convince her last year. I said, it's not going to take much time, but after that, with the amount of efforts and dedication they put in, it's really admirable. So I really wanted to give a big round of applause to our 2 co-chairs. And with that, I'd like to again, introduce our moderator, Joss. Again, I asked him, just tell me 2 lines about yourself, and he was telling he's with Greylock, and Greylock does this and that. I said that he can say. But then he told me that he was at LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. Now he's at Greylock, so that just tells in itself. So with that, I will hand it over to Josh to get the panel going. Thank you, Josh, again, and thanks a lot to all the panelists over here.
Thanks, Amin, and thank you guys all for coming out on a Tuesday night. So we actually have a great panel tonight. We were just talking in the back room. It was kind of amazing to realize, that at 10 to 20 years of experience that just about everybody has here in software and technology, and many of the guys specifically in gaming. And I just think so really just hope that we can kind of talk through kind of the state of where social gaming is today, both on the web, on Facebook, on mobile, and like where it can go, and what kind of companies that we really kind of see maybe coming out of this, over the next couple of years with all the challenges that are happening. And one of the things that we're talking about was, it's hard to believe that just 5 years ago, 2007, like Facebook didn't exist, the iPhone didn't exist, and we were actually still in a world where the three big gaming companies were Nintendo with the Wii, Microsoft with the Xbox, and Sony with the PlayStation. And there was a little bit of like downloadable games on the web, that there were sort of these like casual games that were pay to download that maybe made some money, but nobody thought were a really big business. And fast forward over the past 5 years, and we've just seen such incredible changes. Facebook opened up its platform, and you saw games and companies like Zynga able to just amass hundreds of millions of users almost for free through all these like viral and user acquisition tactics. You saw Apple open up their platform, and all of a sudden people were able to download any games they wanted on their phone, and in fact paying 99 cents for them and make more money. And you saw Zynga invent these new business models around virtual currency and free-to-play that you'd maybe seen a little bit of in MMOs or in sort of other environments before, but then all of a sudden you get to putting this on like the mass market, and you put it on a farm where people are paying to like harvest their vegetables faster, and you're making tens and hundreds of millions of dollars per year from users, and it's just a really big transformation. And so thought with the group today, like now it's getting to a point where, is it too hard to launch a new game, or is it even possible to build another company that can do that, or is it too expensive? So I thought with the group today, we could really have everybody introduce themselves, and then we'll just talk a little bit about what's going on in the state of gaming today, and then we'd love to open it up for your questions as well. So I don't know if we want to start with just brief intros, start with Vatsal.
Hi, my name is Vatsal Bhardwaj. I have been in the tech industry for over 8-9 years. Currently, I'm working at StoreMate in the product management group. StoreMate, we are a mobile gaming startup. We focus on iOS and Android. We have over 30 titles and more than 200 million downloads on these platforms. Before StoreMate, I was in corporate strategy group at Zynga.
My name is Raj Pai. I used to be an avid gamer during my undergraduate days, and my claim to fame was playing Tetris, so that dates me. My journey into gaming started off, I came into gaming through my interest in big data and analytics, having been in this industry for a while. I did some early work with Zynga about 4 or 5 years back, and 2 years back, when I was reading some news clips from Zynga, I read that Zynga is more of an analytics company rather than a gaming company. So when I decided to launch Claritix about 2 years back, one of our goals was to see if we could put Zynga Analytics in a box for the indie developers, the independent developers, small and medium-sized developers. We went out and spoke to hundreds of game developers, and the reality is we realized that in the social gaming space, and more in the mobile gaming space, metrics is the game for a lot of these businesses. And we launched a company last year. We serve over 40 million active users, active gamers today. We've gone from indie developers to now serving large publishers also. We have a terrific panel, and I look forward to the discussion today.
My name's Joe Keane, and I'm shocked to discover that I've been in the games business for about 18 years now, starting at Electronic Arts many years ago, well, through the console cycle, through the reemergence of PC games, the decline of PC games, the emergence of online games, the decline of online games, and most recently social. My most recent startup was Engimoko, which was one of the early iPhone iPod Touch games companies. We launched in 2008. Our timing was pretty good, and we had a lot of early success. We ended up selling the company in late 2010 to DNA, an even bigger mobile games company based in Japan. So I've been I've company. I've spent the last sort of 9 months or so thinking, reflecting, wondering what I'm going to do next, and hoping to get some good ideas from this panel.
Hello everyone, my name is Albert Chen. I'm assistant professor at Cogswell College, just right down the road off of 237. So I'm part of full-time faculty and head of the game development program at Cogswell. Prior to joining full-time faculty in 2007, I was a full-time professional mainstream developer, game developer. I worked at studios like EA, LucasArts, 3DO Company, if anybody remembers that, Trip Hawkins. He's founded Digital Chocolate now, and also Factor 5, a private German company that specialized in Nintendo titles, and then the last title was a Sony product. My interests are definitely from the game design and production aspect, and so I teach specifically game design, level design, and game production for our students. And Cogswell is a very unique and kind of under the radar kind of college, at least for now. We're trying to get the word out, but essentially our focus is really to develop world-class developers who really understand digital media, but also the business side of things. And so we also include entrepreneurship program as well as digital arts and animation.
Hi, my name is Doug Banks. Like you were saying, surprising, I just did the math and it's been 17 years for me. I've been doing games almost exclusively the engineering side of things. I've worked on PC games, platform games, Masagu multiplayer, Facebook, and most recently games for the iPhone and iPad with a small startup over the past year. And in between was a break for a few years at Google and also a year teaching high school. So.
It's awesome. So, I mean, as you can tell, a lot of people have spent a lot of time thinking about games, working on the stuff that was the very beginning of the PC industry of gaming and consoles, all the way to the most current stuff. And so, one of the things I like to always ask people, now I've been in venture capital for like 6 months, but before I was worked at a whole bunch of companies, is I like to think about kind of origin stories for companies, and think about how do they really get off the ground. You think about origin stories in the same way that like every superhero has an origin where they kind of got their superpowers and their unique point of view and their kind of unique take on the world. And you think about eBay and its idea of like a guy had a bunch of Pez dispensers that he wanted to figure out how to sell, needed a service for it. Or you think about Facebook where you had a guy on campus who wanted to like figure out who the cute girls were on campus, so he figured he'd build a website where everyone would upload their pictures so we could see them all. And so I always like to kind of start conversations like this, like asking people about their companies. I think Joe, who founded NGMoko, would be a great place to start to kind of let us know. I'm curious of like what was sort of the origin story behind NGMoko, and what did you see at the time, and how did you go build it into a great company?
The 4 founders of NGMoko, and we each had a slightly different experience. In fact, none of us were actually, that's not true. 2 of us were working at the same company at the time we founded NGMoko, slightly after. But I think the common thread was the sense that the games we had all been working on most recently were just far too complicated, far too expensive, and took much too long to get to market to be satisfying as developers, as business executives, as business modelers, that the traditional, what I'll call the traditional games business, was just too heavy, too burdened with too many, too many things to do, outsized expectations about what needs to be done, and hence budgets and timelines and development resources were just exploding. So I'd just gone through that experience on a massive multiplayer online game development cycle. Two of my co-founders had just gone through the opposite experience, having come to this realization about 6 months earlier than I did, that this was not the way to go. And they'd done a quick game, sort of a fairly short development cycle game for the Wii, and had come away from that experience refreshed and excited. They had both just purchased the original iPhone and were amazed by what it could do, introduced me to it and its wonders, even in the App Store. And I think collectively we decided that there was a place in the world for short development cycles, good game experiences, and lots of experimentation. And for us, it was a refreshing way to re-enter the games business after a long time and when it becomes very difficult business.
Wow, that's a great story and turned out really well. I think Doug, you recently founded a company, on your own. I'd love you to talk about sort of your story and how you got there too.
Sure. So I was at a company doing Facebook games after a long break of not doing games, and the good news is it reminded me how much I loved doing games, that working in a creative environment with artists who are hilarious, if you ever get a chance to work with a bunch of artists, it was a lot of fun. And at the same time, we were chasing Facebook constantly, and it reminded me how much I don't like Facebook games. Sorry, apologize. But how we were basically just trying to do, trying to catch up with Zynga, and I was very unhappy with it because I felt like the things that draw me to games, none of that was going on. We were just kind of chasing someone else. And then over the Christmas break, they encouraged us to take some time to make up prototypes of what games we'd be doing next. And for the first time in all the time that I've described, I sat down and tried to make a game that I would like to play, like from my own ideas, my own complete ownership, and it was so fun. And I came back after the break like, well, I haven't done this sooner. And at the same time, the company said, actually, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to make a clone of Kingdom of Camelot. So I kind of thought, oh, it's time to think about what's next. And I kind of started doing the math about how difficult would it be to just do a game on my own. Like, what would the costs be? What technology do I know? Do I not know? What would I really need to make it happen? And the only thing I came down to was office space. Like, I knew I'd get nothing done at my house. So I started looking around and found this incubator and wound up hanging out there trying to get to schmooze with them to get some space. In doing that, met some people who had recently founded this small company doing educational games. I described to them the game I wanted to make. They said, you should do that with us. And I said, okay, that's, it kind of was a really nice marriage. And so that's what I spent the past year doing. It's been a small company and building out that game and also contributing to other projects that company has going on.
And Raj, I know you started a company about a year ago and would love you to walk through some of your background too.
Sure. Like I said during my introduction, I think my co-founder and I were in the BI space. We love metrics, we love KPIs, and when after our last company got sold, we were in a coffee shop and we were used to playing Farmville and a number of other games. We looked around and we saw this interesting opportunity of triangulating big data and analytics. And we were talking to a number of developers in the social ecosystem to figure out where is analytics absolutely critical today. And we worked with a few indie developers initially. And what we realized very quickly is it doesn't matter the size of the gaming company or the size of the publisher you are. Metrics is the lifeline that drives a lot of these companies, and we started Claritex to build analytics as a service. And true enough, now that we've worked with smaller as well as big publishers, we see that more and more analytics as a service, and especially in the gaming industry, is becoming critical. Because what you're putting out as a product, whether you're a small developer or a big developer like Zynga, you're putting out a game as a service, and you're evolving the game constantly. Because previously, if you look at games, you used to stick a game into a box and sell it in a retail shop. Today, your game evolves along with the users that are playing the game. That's been a wonderful experience for us.
And then Albert, I think when you introduced that you were teaching games at a university, I found it really interesting, just the fact that there was even a games program in university. Would love you to talk about sort of how that got started and how you got involved.
Okay, so if we're talking about superhero origin stories, I equate myself with Professor X without the bald head and the wheelchair. Anybody watch X-Men? So I basically work at a school of interesting people, very very talented, very enthusiastic, very special students who may not necessarily fit in your typical Stanford, Berkeley, Harvard situations, but they excel in being creative and expressing themselves, and really, for my students, they're really passionate about games, and that's where I come from. Over 12 years in professional development, I mean that's where I kind of live off of, and really was that passion to develop games, and so I think from a school perspective, I think it's very useful for us to start formalizing all the different ideas and strategies that we developed in the field, but we never really had the time to codify and to really, jot these notes down, really analyze what the heck did we do during production, and actually formalize all these things and actually teach people how to actually approach design questions and situations, and hopefully avoid a lot of the pitfalls and problems that we encountered back in the day. So that's kind of where, I was kind of teaching a lot of my junior designers in my various design roles in various studios, and so it just kind of, teaching kind of grew from that initial take of mentoring. And so that's how my career in academics started, was that transition from making games to really understanding games, and then finally starting to teach about games.
It's really interesting, and it's something I hadn't really heard of before. So one of the interesting things I think with games, I assume most entrepreneurs I meet, and probably most of us, work on software or other technology where we're building these products that kind of you can sell time and time again. And games always have this sort of different aspect, I think, which is you're trying to make a hit. You're trying to make something that sort of gets a lot of usage for some period of time, and they all have some half-life over 3 to 6 months where people are using them. And that's always been true, whether it was back in the days of EA and you had to keep having a new Madden football every year, or but I see the cycles going even faster and faster these days. And I'm sure we've all heard of the company OMG Pop pretty recently. That they were literally like 6 or 8 weeks from running out of money, and then all of a sudden they the last game that they had sort of been working on in their time to hopefully work was called Draw Something. And literally that was like the fastest to 1 million users, the fastest to 10 million users, kind of, and everybody's just amazed. And then they, at the peak of everything, they sell the company to Zynga for $200 million, which is pretty incredible difference from running out of cash. And so one of the things I'd love the panel to think about is like, what are some of the secrets for finding a game that comes together that really takes off? Joe talked a little about how long it used to take for game cycles to try to get there. I'd love to start with Vatsal, who works at a company that has 30 games and 3 different kind of big brands. And how do you make the investment decision in a game, and what do you look for to make it really pop?
So yeah, sure. I think so. We like to sort of balance the passion of the people, the passion of the game designers, developers, along with solid business analysis. So the way we look at new opportunities is, okay, what are consumers currently doing? We consider the whole market as a petri dish, and we look at what's working. And then, the approach with OMG Pop or Rovio Turk, where they made a lot of games and they suddenly found one which was a big hit. We actually take an approach of, there is a lot of risk mitigation which you can do upfront before you start to build a game. So there are simple, quick and dirty tests which you could do, using things like an Amazon Mechanical Turk. You can test out a concept very, very quickly, which will tell you, okay, does this theme or concept has legs? So that's how we typically start. Thinking about, what makes a game great. The top line answer is, it should deliver a lot of fun, and it should also make tons and tons of money. So, I can break it down further. So, first thing, a good game should create an aspiration upfront. So, a lot of your users, if you're making a game, anywhere from 60 to 80% of your users are never going to come back after the first session. So, it's very, very important that in the first session, you create an aspiration for the user on what the game is about. The second thing is the core game mechanics. So you have to think about what is the user going to come back to for this game. So is it a harvesting mechanic or collection mechanic? If it's a PvP game, what is it which will make the user to come back? The third thing, especially for social games, is meaningful social interactions. So on Facebook, you saw a lot of gifting and requesting parts from your friends. So that's all very, very V1, and that's a baseline. If you're building a game now, a good social game, you have to really think about, what's a meaningful, good social interactions. And let me give you 2 examples. One is, I don't know how many of you have played Sim Social, but that game especially did something which I like to call as relationship harvesting. So the more you interact with your friends, the more of a currency which you get, and that currency you can redeem within the game for other things. So we're thinking more about what's a meaningful social interaction. And then the fourth piece is really marketing, especially true on Facebook, but especially true on mobile devices. So you have a great game, you have great elements, but now you have to really think about the packaging. So you're iterating on your game icon, your game screenshots, the name of the game. All these factors will make a big difference in how much money you will end up spending through ad spend versus organic. So those are the things we think about making social games.
Awesome. Anybody, Albert, I know that you actually teach this for a living, so if you can share some of your great lessons that you teach would be really interesting for how you put together the pieces for a great game.
I try to go beyond just making games fun and making money, but so that's part of the secret. The others, I mean, it's really about just to kind of follow up. It's really about making games that are first juicy, and then second sticky. So when I mean juicy, let's look at the game industry in its infancy back in the 70s and 80s, where in America and various parts of the world, we were talking about coin-op games. In coin-op games, I mean, well, let's see, microtransactions kind of, right? You kind of, put your quarter in, and then you get a very short play experience. And so the secret to the very successful coin-op games was really to hook the player within the first, let's say, 10 to 15 seconds, right? To get them excited and then really engage them right away so that they stick around, and if they lose, then they're more than willing to convert to actually put in another quarter to continue playing. And so then you had the advent of high scores, leaderboards, which essentially is a parallel to what we see now, which is, well, you're kind of expressing how well you've done in a game to your friends and to strangers. And so we're seeing that's a similar type of recipe in let's say mobile or social games, where okay, we need to engage the player very quickly, get them excited about the game, and then find ways to get them to re-engage and to re-engage for not necessarily a long stretch of time per play session, but short play sessions, but repeated play sessions. And so, that really ties into the metrics. Really, I mean, metrics are just wonderful for game designers, because now you actually have real-time feedback about whether certain aspects of your game is actually engaging the player or not. And I mean, I wish we had that back in the day when we had to just guess at whether a player will actually enjoy doing something in our game. And so that's a very powerful tool that you can access now. Another thing is really iteration. It's really not worrying about creating a massive design documentation, talking over your mechanics over and over again, making the game way too complex. It's really about getting the game up and running within an hour, and just running it. Don't worry about the graphics. Don't worry about fancy interface or whatever. Just get simple game mechanics down, run it, play it, get it in front of people right away, and try different things out until you really iterate. And nowadays with the access to development tools and just the speed of development, you can do that quite a bit. And especially if you're designing your game as a service, tied in with, let's say, a way to measure player interaction, it's a very powerful thing that you can essentially design as you go, and really adapt to your players' desires and passions and needs in real time almost.
That's really interesting. And Joe, I was wondering if you had any thoughts. You talked about the console space or the PC space that started getting so expensive to actually be producing any games. I'm curious. I've heard different things that even in the mobile and the social games, we're starting to get to that same level again. And so I'm kind of curious of how the stuff that you're thinking has changed since you were first seeing that iPhone in that magic moment versus now.
Yeah, I think the trend is directionally the same. I think I hope that the level of spending is not followed, and certainly for successful companies style budgets on the next game. That's, I hope you know. So I think the everybody's mentioned here the ability to get something up quickly, even if you're only playing it internally or on a 50-person now Apple lets you on the ad hoc distribution. Getting that feedback, analytics are essential, and both for business intelligence, but also for moment-to-moment, second-to-second gameplay interpretation. What are people doing? What are they clicking? What are they not clicking? What are they seeing? What are they not seeing? What are they likely to touch next? What are they not responding to at all? Being able to feed that back in real time. And I think if I had one message I could deliver to the broader games development community, and I think it's happening. So they probably don't need my message. It is you have the tools now to pay much closer attention to what people actually want to do and enjoy doing, and are most likely to do again. And that's a critical task that we didn't need to think about back then, because again, think about the business model. The business model back then was figure out a way to get this number of people to pay $50 for this game. It's a one-time sale. There's no follow-up service for the most part. Everything was geared toward making something that seemed and appeared, and at least in the first hour or two, would be recommended to other people as a great game experience worth your $50. Today, where you're not only selling things for much less money, you're giving them away. The vast majority of those 12 million people a day who play draw something, don't pay anything, probably never will pay anything. What you're trying to do is get a massive users and harvest from that massive users the group of people who are so committed or so attached to the experience that they will pay a lot of money to make that for free usership. So the model is completely different, and paying close attention to what people actually like to do rather than what you as a game designer or an auteur or business leader think people want to do or think people should want to do is all the difference in the world. And I think in some ways games are becoming much more honest and much more interesting now that we're focused on those questions instead of how do I sell this? How do I sell Madden 2012?
And Raj, I don't know if you had, I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts on, with all this data and all this stuff flowing through now, how do you actually process it to make good decisions? Because you kind of are now going from there was no data before to now we know every single button and pixel a user pushes in a game. And so if you could just kind of give some thoughts on how to sort of parse through that to make intelligent decisions.
Yeah, I think our experience working with some of the smaller developers, we see this huge dichotomy. Either developers collect everything or developers don't collect anything. And the reality is you got to collect enough data at every stage of evolution of the company. So you're looking at the right set of metrics. I'll just respond to the earlier question about OMG Pop also. You mentioned they went through 38 games before they found that 39th wonder that gave them the $200 million exit. If you look at the gaming space, nothing has fundamentally changed. It's still, content is king. You still need to have a great game with great content and great game mechanics to be successful. What has changed fundamentally is the cost of marketing and distribution. So what OMG Pop discovered on their 39th game, they had great content and they had phenomenal distribution. They had such a compelling game that within a week, it had spread to millions and millions of users. And I think that is the fundamental thing. If you're trying to build a successful social or a mobile game, you really have to figure out what is that compelling content that is going to get you distribution going. And when we look at some of our smaller developers who become successful, they pay very key attention to what are they doing to attract that first set of users, and very quickly they zone in on what drives engagement. I think Albert was mentioning about this. It's not just about having a one-time session with the game. It's what is bringing the user back, and more importantly, what is making the user come back and invite more friends to play that game, which is a critical, engagement is critical in the early stages of evolution of a company.
I think that's a really, really great point, and like really important to think about. And actually, I'm gonna segue that to like talking about kind of gaming companies. So we talked about a company that did 38 games, didn't quite work. They got a 39th one that worked. They had a $200 million exit. the Joe and the Njimoku team had a great exit. Vatsal's worked for Storm8 and Zynga that both have multi-billion-dollar valuations, or Zynga's public, and yet it actually seems like as just an indie developer, there's actually a greater opportunity to kind of create your own business than there ever was before. That was something we were talking about in back that I think Doug had a really interesting perspective on, and would love just to kind of hear your thoughts on how can you build something meaningful that isn't just trying to gun it for a massive company.
Yeah. Again, I kind of felt nervous about speaking on this panel because in some sense I feel like I'm the anti-entrepreneur in all this. But if you apply a lot of the thinking that's going on here to other forms of media, like movies or music, if you ask yourself if every song that came out was run by 1 million people and was adjusted so that the largest number of people liked it, everything would be pop music. We'd get 500 boy bands and that's it. And I realize that at the end of the day you need to pay the bills and make money to sustain a large company, but at the same time the people who are going to produce the most quality work for you, the engineers and the artists, it's really important to them to produce something that they really like, that they really are excited about. If they're just doing it for money, they could probably go work at Facebook or Google and make more money. So there's kind of a tricky balance there. And for me, I definitely have taken a hit financially working at this small company, but it's very much outweighed at this point by the freedom I have to make something that I'm really excited about. And I think kind of as a company, our strategy, number one, I think, for whatever reason, we have a small group of people who are really excited about making educational games, who are passionate about actually making something that has an impact on the world. And perhaps a way to, differentiate yourself or to be a smaller independent company, if you're lucky enough to find a group of people who are, excited about making something they really believe in and are willing to, sacrifice for it, you can produce something really unique. And also, if there's something you're doing besides just gaming, if there's a story you're telling that isn't just we're, chasing a dollar to make the next, Draw Something or Angry Birds, but there's some sort of deeper cause or purpose. And you'll hear about that a lot nowadays, like gamification of blah. We're trying to teach kids a certain value, or we're trying to change the way people think about something. I think there's a lot of opportunities there to catch people who are really passionate and excited in a way that they might not be motivated to join a Zynga.
Yeah, and I think Vatsal working at one of the bigger companies would love to kind of hear the other side of how you can both kind of keep the love going, but also do the analytic approach and build a great company.
I think it goes without saying that you have to be passionate about what you're doing. And at Zynga and at Storm8, we pay a lot of attention to what do developers, game designers actually want to build, but we do moderate it with what can be done, what will work in the marketplace through quick tests which we can do. So yeah, there has to be. You're absolutely right. There has to be a balance. There has to be enough creative freedom to innovate, and that's how we make great games. We do rely a lot on analytics when it comes to game optimization. I think in an earlier question we hinted on it a little bit. The approach we take is in the game development and design phase, we identify a set of hypotheses which we want to test. So if we believe this is the core game loop, that's a hypothesis. If we believe there are certain items within the game which are going to do well, that's a hypothesis. So we come up with a list of hypotheses, and in initial phase of game development, we actually do a lot of rigorous A/B testing. In the first-time user experience, in driving higher pair conversion, in driving higher retention. So, and based on the data which we get back, then we go back to the whiteboard and iterate. We say, okay, our hypothesis was Pink Peacock, for example, a castle game is going to do very well. It's not doing well, so okay, let's change it. Let's iterate on it. Let's test something else. So it's a continuous iteration process by looking at data, validating our hypothesis, doing a lot of A/B testing, and of course, working closely with the larger team and artists and game designers so that we are innovating through the process. But we like to think of it more as game design driven by data.
That's great. So one of the other things we're talking about is that we're in this interesting world right now where people have always had to pay a lot to build on game platforms. Even when you were building on the Xbox, you had to train up and get a lot of specialized experience for that, or you're building on Nintendo and you're had to build you're building the software for cartridges and had to deal with all that. But in today's world, you're kind of stuck with if you're building on Facebook, especially now, you're paying a 30% Facebook tax for using Facebook credits in your game. If you're building on Apple or Android, you're paying 30% to Apple or Android for every sale made of your game or through your game. Are we in a world where just like the 30% tax is sort of the price to pay, and you can't otherwise get on those platforms? Or do we see some sort of better world coming up soon that looks a lot better for building games and sustaining revenue? Or is it really just Apple, Google, and Facebook that are making the most out of all this? Anyone want to take that and start?
Since I don't actually have an active business interest, I would conflict with
Should we stop the camera for this part?
It was interesting for me to come back into it, to move into what seemed like a completely different world. I'd been in the console world for a long time. Was in the PC games business for 5 years. And felt great freedom there because, of course, you don't have to pay any of these taxes, and you have total control of your data. You can build your own service. You can build your own platform. You didn't have to rely on anybody. You didn't get anything from them, but I think on balance that's to the good. So to come back into the world, which seemed sort of attractively open in 2008 when sort of the Apple App Store 1.0 came about, and to watch it evolve over the next couple of years as it became more rule-bound, more restrictive, more expensive in subtle ways. The 30% was always the same, but there are other sort of taxes on your business, slower, much trickier to navigate in terms of getting your content approved. At that point, it felt to me very much like being back in the old console world, which is really it's a master-servant relationship. You cannot get access to this device and this distribution platform, this distribution ecosystem, unless you sign the agreement. The agreement says you can't go around us, you can't evade us, as EA did once, famously with the Sega. So for me, it was kind of a recapitulation, and I gotta say, I hated that part of the business every bit as much as I hated the console part of the business. And I think, in fact, it has become worse as time has gone on. The companies, Google has followed largely, not completely, but largely, sort of in lockstep behind Apple, watching, frankly, what Apple could get away with in terms of development restrictions and approval restrictions, and then sort of following in their footsteps. So the trend, I think, has been mostly negative, at least since 2008 when it all started. I'm not close enough to the business now to know whether it's softening at all or changing. The most hopeful signs that I see out there on the horizon are the number of companies that are being, that are bringing to market alternatives that are HTML5 and advanced JavaScript, the increasing competency of JavaScript interpreters to allow us to actually create games that are web savvy, can be adapted or modified automatically to work on mobile. I think there are kernels of there's sort of 1,000 points of light out there that are beginning to show promise. It remains to be seen whether they're going to blossom into a fully fledged web-based alternative. And the web, honestly, at this point really is the only credible alternative to the proprietary platforms that you see behind the walled gardens you see, across mobile and on Facebook.
Anyone else have an add to that?
I think it's a great question, and if you look at Facebook, Google Plus, and all these platforms, we tend to get a very North American-centric viewpoint. But if you step out, we work with some developers outside in Turkey, in India, in Russia. There are social networks out there globally that have less taxes, and your game can really evolve and spread very virally before you come back and put it up on a Facebook. So we see indie developers using that approach to go, because games is a global phenomenon. And we see a lot of game developers using that tactic to go out, get it popular in some other countries, and then bring it back. which is an interesting phenomenon, I think. And plus, if you look at the mobile ecosystem, I think that we're just getting started. It's really innings one. There are a lot of different alternatives, a lot of different distribution platforms that will emerge.
Those are great points. But you don't even have to go. Japan is a market in which you've got the most advanced in some ways, certainly, probably still, but until recently, if not, the most advanced mobile gaming ecosystem and economy in the world. Per capita basis, it outpaces this country by 10 or 15x. That market is much less restrictive. The taxes are lower. I think it's sort of at 9 or 10% from Docomo or any of the large carriers. You're able to build your own platform. You're not beholden to this to the sort of monolithic controls and restrictions that you are on either Apple or Facebook. And I find that market, not just because we sold into it, but I find that market actually more vibrant even than what I'm seeing on the App Store. And interestingly, now that smartphones are much more widely available in Japan, you're seeing Apple and the Apple style ecosystem start to dominate there, which I think is not progress in perspective.
And Albert, did you have?